So the past year, I've been trying to come up with something that's going to be a little bit different. The only way I ever wanted to release or try to sell presets was if I had something different that nobody else had out. So for the past 2, 3 months, I've been working with the Alien Skin engineers to help me design something that was unique that they've never done. And nobody offers any exposure presets. Most people don't even know what Alien Skin exposure is. And basically, using a new software outside of Lightroom scares everybody, but it's actually, once I show it to you, it's very, very similar to Lightroom. There's no learning curve whatsoever. And if you know Photoshop even a little bit, it's honestly a perfect mix of Photoshop and Lightroom. So you're getting the best of both worlds, but they're a company that's still growing. They're not quite there yet to where I can just use the Alien Skin alone. So I use it as a plugin, which I'll show you, to Lightroom, and it's kind of like a fine-tuning thing. So every image that I edit that sees the light of day gets run through both Lightroom and through exposure. I'll show you the benefits, the advantages, and what I did was I basically simplified everything to the point where I give you presets just like all the other presets that are for sale out there right now. And not just a one-click preset, but underneath of each preset, it's one-click adjustments that you can make that you'll be able to see where I make the adjustment when I use these presets to kind of, go a little bit further, do a little bit less, and learn how to tweak them yourself. Because honestly, nobody's goal should be to have their presets look exactly like mine. You want to, have your own look. So I basically wanted to come up with 3 base presets that you guys could, or that, anybody that purchased these could use to very easily teach themselves how to make their own versions of this. And then once you see how powerful Alien Skin is, and the difference between if you were just to leave it as a Lightroom edit compared to using both, it's night and day. And once I seen that a few years ago, I knew that was the road I wanted to take. So, I don't want to blabber on anymore. I didn't want to make this about, teaching anybody how to use Lightroom or exposure. I'm going to show you how the preset system works, and I'll try to answer everybody's questions that I can. But my goal was to simplify this as much as possible until, and also teach you guys through the toolbox that I built for each preset, teach you guys how to become more familiar with the important adjustments to make to create your own. So the biggest thing with editing out is consistency. Whenever I edit a session, sessions might differ a little bit from session to session or wedding to wedding, but within one job, you have to be consistent. So if you have warm highlights, and if that's the route you're going to go, then you need to stay with that throughout the entire shoot. And all 3 of these color presets that I designed, they're pretty similar, but you'll see the differences, and you'll see that in the toolbox, the changes you can make, really, you'll be able to see how they start to separate themselves from one another. And there's only one Alien Skin exposure preset, and it has layers to it, which makes it even easier, but it's only one. So it's pretty simple, and you'll see. So I grabbed a bunch of random images that have different lighting situations. I grabbed the reception shot. I grabbed close-ups, a headshot, Canon files, Nikon files, Leica files. Basically, if anybody's followed my work, knows that I've shot with all 3 of those systems extensively over the past 7, 8 years. So these presets work pretty good across the board. You don't have to change the camera profile. You just have to tweak things a little bit and mainly it's just white balance. So I'll go through and I'll show you guys how I do it. Right off the bat, though, let me explain one thing. Alien Skin Exposure, you know, I didn't want to sell a preset for a software that was going to cost money or cost more money, because not only are you buying a preset, but you're also now having to invest into a new software. Because I worked with them on this, they were able to give me a discount code. So anybody who purchases the add-on exposure preset, you get a discount code that drops it from $130 down to $99. And you also get a free month trial period. So you save yourself $30 there, and I think it's only a $50 difference to add on the exposure preset to the Lightroom presets. So it's kind of a no-brainer just to go for it and check it out. You know, if you don't like it after the month trial, then, you know, you're out, you know, the $50. But I honestly would find it hard to believe that nobody would want to invest in it once you've seen how powerful it is and how much better it is than Lightroom at certain things. So, all right, let's get started real quick. Any questions right off the bat? It's hard for me to see questions coming in. So I'll look up and glance up every now and then. But does anybody have any questions before we get started? I'm going to try to swap screens here. Put this guy over here. Did that just screw everybody up? Yes, it did. Let me just move the screen. And yeah, the exposure coupon they gave me, it's only good for 24 hours after the webinar. So whatever time we end, they gave me 24 hours to make it live. I'm going to turn off screen sharing real quick. All I know is my career in webinars is definitely going to take off after this. All right, let's see if we can make this happen. Screen share on. All right, we good? Yeah, you know what? I oiled my beard a little bit. Not bad. All right. So the first one, so you got 3 color presets, right? If you open them up, you have, let me turn this off so this isn't in the way. Turn that off, you don't got to look at me. You got the color base for Twisted Copper. I mean, if you think coming up with names for Instagram posts or quotes, coming up with names for presets is even worse. But here's how it's set up with the Lightroom side of things. You got 3 bases. As of tomorrow, there'll be a 4th I didn't want to have it on here because I didn't fully test it out yet. So you got all three. Once you click on the base, then you can make any adjustments you want to make as far as cropping. So this is actually a Nikon shot by Eric Tallarico. I usually do a 16:10 crop. So I'm basically going to show you how I edit these. You know, obviously, if you guys are interested in the presets, you're interested in how I use them, show you how I use them, and you guys can roll with them however you like. But this is how I would crop it. So the base of the preset really is you have the profile, which is up here at the top. Each of them, the tone curve, I started from scratch. Same with the HSL panel, all from scratch. Split toning is basically the same. It was really popular over the last few years to do warm highlights and cooler shadows. And I went the opposite direction. I went, you know, cooler highlights, warmer shadows, and you'll see why, because I can make those adjustments other places. I don't do any sharpening in Lightroom, so I can close that out. Lens corrections, what I do is, and how each preset's laid out, is you have the vignetting here. So I'm not a huge fan of seeing the vignetting right off the bat. I like to be able to click on the preset, see how my colors look, see how the white balance looks, exposure, etc., without worrying about the vignetting. So each preset has it set like this, to where it takes away, this would be default basically, it takes away the vignetting. No grain. I don't know any grain. Grain in Lightroom, it looks like shit. It's horrible. You don't have much control over it. It's the amount, size, and roughness. That's all you got as far as control. I'll show you what exposure does that makes it so much better. Calibration. I wouldn't mess with the calibration as far as these presets go. If you want to, feel free, but they don't vary much from, I don't know if they vary at all. I'd have to check, but basically I don't touch them. I set them up early years ago, and I haven't messed with them. Everything else I changed. So what you have to realize is that, for those of you who don't know much about creating presets on your own, is that you got to think of the HSL panel, which you have, you know, you can adjust each color. So like the red hue, you can make it more red. You can make it more orange. If you look at her skin tone. So you basically have adjustments you can make here. You can make split toning, and the tone curve. These are what took me the longest time to design, because any slight change in this is going to drastically change the color. And the biggest thing I wanted to do when I designed these was that I didn't want to have there be a color, you know, if the reds look good, the orange looks good, but then if there was a navy blue color that looked green because of a color change I made, you know, clients aren't going to be happy with that. If they pick their colors because that's what they want, that's what they like on their wedding day. If the groom's wearing a navy blue tux and it has a greenish tint to it, they're not going to be happy. So these presets are made to keep true colors. You know, a lot of times I'll double check. If you just click on this Y down here at the bottom left, if you can see my cursor, it'll show you the original. And a lot of times I'll zoom in and just compare. You know, I just made changes, but I would compare and make sure, like, his tux looked right. If she had a bouquet, I would make sure the color of the flowers looked right. And I wouldn't want them, you know, looking unnatural. All right, so all you have to do is click back on the base to go back to exactly how it was designed. So the tone curve, don't mess with the tone curve. But you got to look at it like you can make changes in a bunch of different places. Split toning, HSL panel, tone curve, white balance, and think of it like, you know, the pyramid of ISO, shutter speed, the exposure pyramid. You know, they all kind of play a role into coming up with the exposure that you want. You know, you make an adjustment to one and it affects all the others. It's the same thing with this. If, you know, I can't make a change to just one area or one panel without it affecting everything else. So it is to start from scratch. I mean, that's the reason it took me 5 years to design these. It's, you know, I would spend months on it at its shot and then kind of give up for a while and just run with it. And then they've kind of just, you know, evolved over the years. But once you get the color base, try not to run off on too many rabbit holes while I'm talking. Once you got the color base down, I have it listed. So this is the profile adjustment, and it's going to give it warmer tones. So if you move your cursor off of it, you can see the difference. And what that's doing is, if you look at the profile up here on the top right, click on it, it now shoots it up to 140. That's the amount of the profile that I changed. And that basically, without having to touch any white balance, it now gives it a warmer tone. And if you want to reset it, so if you make other changes and you just want to reset that one thing, the next change down is a reset. Let me see if I can pull this out. So it just says warmer tones reset. And each one has the, you know, the effect change or the adjustment, and then underneath of it resets just that adjustment, nothing else. So warmer tones, let's reset it. And you can see it's a much cooler image. So, you know, those of you who aren't familiar with messing with profiles would naturally go warmer with the white balance, which is fine. But what that's doing is it's adding a warmer tone to the entire image. Using the profile adjustment, it does things a little bit different. There's a different algorithm. I'm not sure how it works, but it has a different look. So let's set it back. Let's go back. Color base. I prefer warmer tones, but once you get here, you know, you've seen what it did. You've seen that, okay, it made an adjustment. Maybe it's too much. So now this is when you can start to mess with it yourself. I'll bring it back a little bit, or I'll just see where I like it best. So for me, it's like right, it would be right there. Okay, so then just go down to the next one, darker shadows. And when you hover over it, it'll give you a preview of that. So the other trend over the past few years is to drop highlights all the way down and bump shadows all the way up. Everybody wanted to underexpose their images, drop the highlights down, and, you know, pull shadows out as dynamic range became, you know, crazy good. So what happens is now is that you don't have to underexpose anymore. So if I go darker shadows like this, you know, do a reset, see what the difference is. It's slight. If I zoom in, let's see, darker shadows. Yeah, it's very slight. But what I want you to do is see the changes that are being done over here. So let's reset it. I'll click on darker shadows. All I'm doing is dropping the shadows here. And I believe I'm making a change. Let's see. And I made a change down here. Anytime there's a change in shadows, darkness, you know, contrast, it's going to be with these sliders underneath the tone curve or the shadows and blacks. We outsource all of our associate work to the Image Salon, and they have these presets. And one of the biggest, learning curves with them was when I would, when I edit, skin tones are what's most important. So right now they're a little bit dark. So I know that I can bump up the blacks. I can bump up shadows. That's a little bit too much. And I'm good to go. The other thing is I know that I can bump up the luminance on orange and bring their skin tones up. Okay, so the next step down is the vignette. So I make it so that you can add the natural lens vignette back in. Reset it, add it back in. And I showed you earlier where that was done, and it's just right here under the lens corrections. And basically all it's doing is going from here to here. And then the midpoint is basically how far in you want it to go. So all depends on the look you're going for. Lately, for me, I haven't been using a vignette, so I'll reset that. The other change that I've noticed over the past year for me is I've done a lot of really focusing on the orange, yellow, and red hues. And basically all it is are these three sliders in the HSL panel. The problem is if you move it slightly too much, you're going to get some goofy looking colors. But I always hated the looks of greens that were too bright green, unnatural looking, like neon looking greens. So this here, if you watch the green colors in the tree, this slider alone can take care of that. And it's only the green and the green hue. So if you watch their skin tones at the same time, let's watch their skin tones. It's having no effect on their skin tones whatsoever. But if you look at the tree, it's making a big difference. This is where I ended up being happy with it, with just about all my presets, is right here. To me, that looks natural. It's not too neon. It's not too, minty colored. That was like a big trend. But if you look at their skin tones and the grass, if I move this, now you can see the differences. To me, I like it to be a little bit more orange. So with the yellow hue, a lot of people will just get rid of it. They'll drop it all the way down. But then, you get too far and it just takes the color out. So rather than getting rid of it, let's change the hue of the yellow color. Let's change, which side it's on. So, all right, I can have more yellow saturation, but if I move it over to the left, it's more orange. Still, skin tones look fine. They look perfect. Up here, you can make adjustments. And most of the time, reds, they're not always, if you go too far this way, you're going to be on the pinkish side. So what I did was I added a red-orange tone adjustment for this preset, which is basically what I would do with this preset with my own work. So if I go here and I just do a reset, if I click on red-orange tone adjustment, watch these sliders. And there you go. So their skin tones right now, it's hard to see exactly how natural they are. So once again, I'll click on the comparison tool. So my monitor is calibrated pretty good. You can see how different the grass looks, and I'm all right with that. I might change that if this was an image for a client. If I was going to give this to the client, I might not want to make it look like all the grass was dead. So then basically, let me see if I reset this. No, it's because I did it myself. So you can see it's just the one slider. So get yourself, I mean, honestly, get yourself accustomed to the sliders and what they can do, because it's really easy for me to look at this and say, all right, I killed all the grass. Let me make it a little bit more green, make a little bit more realistic. There you go. Skin tones stay the same with that red and orange tone adjustment. Get back out. And there you go. So as much as I do like the look of, that's not it. As much as I do like the look of this, it's, you know, it's not a true representation of what they saw that day. So I'll go a little bit more like in the middle right there. So then the only other thing that I have with this preset that I use myself is split toning. And the split toning is not there. Where did it go? User presets, maybe? By accident? Nope. All right. So I got to find that. So there is a split toning. And what it is basically I drop, you know, the highlights right now. For those of you that don't understand split toning, it's basically every single pixel in an image is tagged. You know, it gets tagged as Lightroom or any software tags it as a highlight or a shadow. You know, it's given a number. So if it's, say, below 10, it's listed as a highlight. If it's above 10, it's a shadow, or vice versa. It's the same thing, or that's how split toning works. So any pixel that is tagged as a highlight, that's what split toning does. You can give it a certain amount of saturation, and then you pick a color, you know, that you want to just have changed in the highlight pixels. Nothing in the shadows, like in his tux, will change by you adjusting this. Everything around it is, because there's a lot of highlights around it, but basically I've always kept this the same. So if you want to warm this up, there's a balance now. This is the balance slider between the two. If I drop that down, it gives it more of a warmer tone. You can go this way with it. So it's cooling it off again without having to change the white balance. And white balance is just a very simple algorithm that changes, you know, the warmer or cooler tones. And I don't worry too much about it, because once I get into exposure, I'll show you how much more, I guess power is the good word, how much more power you have over making white balance exactly where you want it. What happens is, with Lightroom, if I make a slight adjustment, it makes a pretty big change. With Alien Skin Exposure, that little change, that little tiny little amount that I move that slider, in order for it to get that much of a change, I have to move it about 3 times that. So you get all those areas in between, and it gives you a lot more control over your white balance. There's tons of images that I cannot get the white balance to look right in Lightroom, and this is one of the biggest reasons I started using Exposure. I bring it into Exposure, and I can get the white balance immediately. And it's crazy. And there's there's more than that. There's a few things. So I'm gonna get this image where I would want it. And when I talk about consistency, a lot of times you want to pay attention to the sky. You know, it's one thing when you can see this image on a gray, you know, you have this gray background. You can change this to white, because once you get it in a blog post, then it, you know, this image has now a white background. If some images have highlights that are warm, and some have highlights that are this color, that's what's going to stand out the most. So you really have to, once you have the preset where you want it, copy and paste it to the other images. So this image here is from the same wedding, shot by Eric. You know, I actually can probably get away with not touching the white balance if I set it back as shot. If I let's see if I warm it up this way. The other thing you'll notice is the clarity, I keep it -10, and the dehaze, even though it's meant for dehazing, it adds a bit of contrast. So there's it's just what I figured works best for me. I do a +10 and a -10. You know, obviously you can change that. It's what works for me. I keep it that way. I rarely ever change it. And the same with the vibrance and saturation. They kind of, you know, alternate. One's negative, one's positive. So what I'll do is I'll copy the first. If you go to the bottom, I'm going to copy everything, sync it over. And I didn't make any local adjustment changes. I'll bump the exposure up. So the other thing I'm going to give you guys is I basically use one graduated filter that I'll use to just bring the attention to the subjects. Sometimes I'll use a brush, but for the most part, it's a lot quicker. And when you're on a time crunch with editing, it's a lot quicker sometimes, or most of the time, to just use a graduated filter. So drop it down to 16:10. The rule thirds, I'll keep them right here for the crop. I'll grab a brush for him. I'm not going to change whether you use a brush or a graduated filter. The preset that I give you, it's basically just -36 or 35. Exposure, highlights are down, shadows are down, the haze is up, clarity is down. So that'll be part of the presets that you can purchase. So I'll color him in just so he's not as hazed out. And all right, so I'll take both of these. Now what you do is, the next step is where I go into alien skin. So before I do that, let me answer any questions you guys have as far as the Lightroom preset goes, as far as anything I just did. I kind of just whipped through it as quick as I could. Most of you have probably used presets in the past. There could be some that haven't. So hop in. Don't be shy to ask any questions. I'd rather you guys ask now, because I want everybody to kind of get a good idea of how these work before I even put them up for sale. So let me, if nobody has any, no biggie, but definitely throw some questions at me if you have them right now before we get into the other software. That's pretty much the second part of my editing process. (16:10). A few years ago, no, more than a few years ago, a couple of buddies of mine, that photographer friends of mine, that we worked on editing a lot. We worked on creating our own presets. A lot of them use 16:9, and it's that's what a lot of the TVs are now. And I prefer a landscape, oriented photograph, just like this. And I like the way it looks when it's stretched out that way. So it's just personal preference, to be honest. That's it. Even I do shoot vertical a lot more than I used to, but even when I do shoot vertical, if I hop to this image, I'm not a fan, which is funny. It's the opposite. I'm not a fan of it being, real thin and narrow. With vertical shots, I go to a 4x3, and that's the way I would crop that. So for landscape orientation, I do 16x10, and then vertical I do it 4x3. It's just personal preference. I mean, that's whatever you guys feel comfortable with, or whatever you guys like. So Ryan, are you saying the images here that I'm using, would these be, the way that I just edited those two photos? Are you saying that is this how I would edit for social media, or if I would edit for the clients? Let me just make sure I'm understanding you right there. All right, so prior to this year, what I would do would be I would edit just like this, and these images out of Lightroom would be what would go into the client's gallery. I would also, as far as social media, as far as the blogs, as far as whatever went on my website, those would be the images that got this next step that I'm about to show you, the exposure step. And what I found was that, the difference was big enough that if a client received the gallery and then looked at their blog post, they would notice the difference. And, they would say, hey, how come it looks different? The problem is, it became an issue where some clients preferred the very basic, look of just Lightroom, and some weren't always happy with the alien skin as I was developing it. Now that I have, the preset developed that I'm going to show you guys, clients they see that look and they want it, and I can't not give it to them. So luckily for me, exposure has gotten a lot better. And, I have a few of the photographers that work for our studio edit, some of their engagement shoots, and you can bulk edit really easy in alien skin. So what used to be only for blog posts or social media or anything that I wanted to use as promotional images, now I do for everything. So once I still edit my own weddings, but what the associates, they get sent off to Image Salon. This step, obviously, because we shoot over 120 weddings a year, I can't do this alien skin step for the associate weddings. So they just get the Lightroom preset done. All of my clients, they pay a premium. So the images all get this next step that you'll see. And it's, a lot of people will look at it and be like, oh, but it's another software. It's more time consuming. Honestly, it's not. It's not that bad. It goes quick. And the difference alone to make your work stand out from everybody else, to me, it outweighs the negative side of taking an extra step. By far, it outweighs it. To have your work get noticed and unique, or have it look unique. So yeah, it's for everything, straight across the board. Sorry for dragging that answer out a lot longer than it should have been. So, all right. So I'll show you what to do with alien skin. So what makes it really easy is if you guys have never used plugins, which you should know about plugins, because if you use Photoshop, you should be using the Photoshop plugin. It just makes things a lot easier. A lot of people still export from Lightroom and then they, drag and drop those images into Photoshop. It's a lot easier if you highlight. So I'm going to highlight these two because it's from the same wedding. If I had 100 images, I would highlight all 100. You right click, you go to edit in, and then you have, here's Photoshop, and then here's Alien Skin Exposure X4. So this is the newest version that just came out today. I think it was released to the public. I'm on their beta team, so I've been using it for a while now. But this is it. So what happens is once you right click, hit edit in, hit exposure 4, it makes a copy of your Lightroom edits. It makes a virtual copy of it. It turns it into a TIFF file, which is it's still a large file that holds a lot of data. It's a lot more than if it, just a JPEG. It's pretty much just as much as a RAW file. So no matter if you go into Photoshop or if you go into exposure 4, Lightroom is going to bring it into the exposure software on its own. Once you make the edits and hit save, the newly edited images with the adjustments you made in exposure get put back right into Lightroom, and you never have to leave Lightroom. I don't export until the image is completely edited. So you'll see that. So I'll hit exposure 4. It says edit with a copy, Lightroom adjustments, edit, and now it's going to make a copy, create TIFF files. And a lot of times what I do is I'll use a color-based, tagging system, especially when I'm calling, I go through and I yellow tag anything I want for a blog post, and then those images immediately get brought into Alien Skin. And then once I know that they're edited fully, I tag them as red, and they're the ones that I put in the blog post. I transfer it at 300 DPI because you can always downgrade to 72 for web size. Basically, I'm not choosing any type of size when I do or use the plugin. So when I use the plugin, it takes the largest size at the largest DPI available, and it creates a copy. When I save it, it puts it back into Lightroom the same way. So I think it might be 300 DPI, it might be 320, I'm not sure. It is, I printed huge photos, especially for Leica, for their WPPI booth this year. Everything I ran through Alien Skin, and it printed fine. So you're not losing any DPI. It transfers at 300, and then you can drop it down to 72, which I do. Usually for web, I go 1920 pixels wide on the long edge, and then 72 DPI. Let me get this ugly mug out of here. All right, so these are, you're looking at presets that I've been working on. Exposure wants me to work on presets that can be used from scratch, right? Only using exposure rather than including Lightroom. But I haven't been able to recreate the look that I want. So for now, I'm still using both. And you'll see it's, there's no reason for me not to use both. It's quick. So the top left here is the one that it's the one that I've worked on as what's going to go up for sale. So click on that. So a few things you'll notice. It's very, very similar to Lightroom. Just take a look around real quick at the panels on the left and the right. The top left, you have, the preview. On the left-hand side, I have my presets that I've designed over the years. Actually, you know what? I think this is the most updated one. I could be wrong. I got to double check. what you do is, even on the right-hand side, it's almost identical. It's pretty funny how there's literally no learning curve whatsoever. So you have at the top, you can do some type of adjustments like you can in Lightroom, as far as, adjusting the image. If it's, on a slant, you need to move it vertically or, horizontally. But at the top, you'll see this is where it's a mix of Photoshop and Lightroom together. You have layers. So imagine Lightroom now. Now you can add layers. And those of you who don't know layers in Photoshop, don't worry about it. It's, it can be confusing at first, so don't stress out about it. You don't have to know or understand layers to use this preset. Just know that each layer represents its own adjustment. Kind of like Lightroom, where I had to create those, adjustment presets. Basically, if you want a warmer color, you would turn this on. If you want grain, you would turn this on. And I have it configured in a very specific way that I found works the best. So this is, let me see. Yeah, all three of these, maybe just the two of these are on. And you'll see there's no changes in white balance. I want this to look, and this is adding on to the preset, the look of the image as it left Lightroom. It's no longer the raw file. So you're actually putting a preset on top of a preset. And what's cool about it is at the very top, you have opacity. You can control no matter how many changes or layers you make, you can control how much of this preset overall you're adding on top of the Lightroom. So let's say you're at 100. At the top left, you click on before, and it shows you what it looked like, before you added my alien skin exposure preset. So the first thing I do is, since there's a lot more control with white balance here, this is where I get my white balance exactly where I want it. And it's also why I have a white background here, because I want to be able to tell what things look like on a white background. What happens is, if you move the tint slider in Lightroom 10.77, this photo would look completely purple. Now I'm just going to make basic adjustments. If you go down to the tone curve, you have shadows, midtones. Right now, their skin is a little bit, their skin tones are what's most important to me. They're a little dark. Rather than taking a brush to them and brushing them out, I'll bump up shadows, bump up exposure a little bit. So now if you click on this twisted color cool, which is the layer that's next up on the bottom, if you watch this color warm, I didn't do what it was supposed to do. Oh, yes, it did. If you click on it, this is what. So you need to click on the layer to show the adjustment. So right here is what I just turned on. So I just turned that on. This is the base layer. And what this is, you have, this is going to be confusing for you guys because you have white balance, right? And you have a cool and warm. When I first started messing around with this, I noticed it really had a unique look it did something completely different to the colors than white balance adjustments. You could use, there's a few photographers that use exposure. Sue Bryce, I believe, is one of them. And she uses this a lot. But this is one that basically is one of the most powerful things about exposure. I've asked their engineers about what exactly it does and what the difference is between white balance, and they don't really have an answer for me. It works differently. It has some kind of, if you look at preserved brightness with this box checked, it somehow, affects the highlights and shadows differently. No matter what, you can control the density. This alone right here can transform the look of your image. And just this one little panel. And it's an awesome, awesome tool that's just not in Lightroom at all. Which is why, using this plugin, it's, I cannot duplicate this look with just Lightroom. It's impossible. I've had, if you guys follow SLR Lounge, I've had Pi try it. He can't get it. It's, you need to be able to use Alien Skin to get this look. The problem is I can't get it with just Alien Skin either, so you got to use both, or I have to use both. So I already got the colors where I want them. I'm not worried about that. This is really nice with the tone curve. It's set up a little bit different than Lightroom. I'm basically just making little fine-tuned changes, getting everything where I want it to be. And this is where I add my sharpening. If you remember, there's no sharpening added in Lightroom. You have a sharpening panel up here that's detail. You can close that. I don't use it. What I was told by the engineers at Alien Skin Exposure is that this is much like Lightroom. And if you compare this to Lightroom head to head, you would notice a huge difference. One of the most what's the word I'm looking for? One of the best sharpening tools that you can use out of any software is what's called Smart Sharpen in Photoshop. You'd have to run, you'd have to know how to do it in Photoshop, and it's a couple steps, but they made it so it's just a slider. So action, that's what word I was looking for in Photoshop. So you have a slider right here. It's a focus. If I zoom in, the focus is more. I randomly grabbed this, so I apologize to Eric for grabbing an out of focus image. But if you look at the leaves on the trees, you bump the radius up. One of the biggest things when I first started using Alien Skin was I had so many photographers ask me about how the hell I got my images to look so sharp. And it's this. I mean, it's right here. It basically, this is where I do my sharpening. Now, if I was to add sharpening in Lightroom instead of this, you would notice a pretty significant difference. It doesn't add any type of noise. It doesn't add any type of, artifacts to it that make it look, like shit. So it definitely, it mimics Smart Sharpen from Photoshop. Should just know that. The grain. So if you go up here, and this twisted warm, basically, so I believe it does the same thing. It moves this to over here. Let's see if I go here. I actually know what I did with that was it's going to give you warmer highlights using the split toning here. Let's go scroll out. So to me, I mean, that's not a look that I would want to go for, but I threw it in there that way you guys can see what effect the split toning has on this preset. Turn that off. I don't use it. And you click on grain. So, I briefly talked about grain in Lightroom. And let's see, grain. It gives you options. If you know anything about film and push processing, this is the same effect. It mimics it. You can choose the type of grain, the type of size of grain. But most importantly with the grain, here's the biggest thing. You can add grain to the shadows, midtones, or highlights. And like I mentioned when I was in Lightroom, is that you can, when you only have one slider for grain, it's amount and then size. You know, when you add grain in Lightroom, it adds it to the entire image. Doesn't matter what the pixel is, if it's a shadow, if it's a highlight, if it's midtone. What's cool about this is I can add grain to just the shadows, and most of the time skin tones are not considered shadows. They're midtones. So you're going to see the grain. If you look at his tux here, if I zoom in, I don't know how close you guys can see this, but if I bump this up, and then if you look closely at his skin here, there's no, I don't see any. There's some in the highlights, but if I take the highlights out, there you go. There's only shadows in the grain. So basically the way I set this up so that this is what the grain setting that I use, and if you click on this and you click on opacity, this will control the opacity of just that layer. So to me, adding grain actually adds a little bit. It's deceiving. I mean, it's almost like smoke and mirrors, but it makes the image look sharper. You're adding grain, a blockiness almost to the highlights and the shadows, and it gives it a sharper look. So basically, here's the overall strength. You can just move that around till you get what you like. You can do it up here. All right, so then once I'm done, I look at the image. I'm not too thrilled with the down here, the colors myself. All right, so this is where I would leave it. It's a little bit desaturated, but I can, if it is at the end, it's going to be back in Lightroom, and I try not to make any more changes after I save this. But if I notice, all right, this is a little bit too desaturated, I can bump the saturation up in Lightroom before I export it. So now all I got to do is hit Shift Command C. You can copy exactly everything you changed. You can copy just one layer at a time. You can copy the overall intensity. So I'm going to hit copy, go to this one, Control Command V. This looks like you could go a little bit. No, stay the same. I'm going to bump up the saturation on this guy because I'm looking at her skin tones. And when more saturation, her skin tones look more natural. I would like to see this to be a little bit more contrasty, so I'll bring the shadows down, see how that affects it. Everybody knows what clarity does in Lightroom. This clarity looks a little bit, it's not as drastic and ugly looking as it is in Lightroom. So, I added 12 and it gives it just a slightly sharper look. And basically, that's where I would leave this image. And this is an awesome image that Eric took. I love it. I can't remember, honestly, I'm curious now how I edited it for the blog post, or I have edited this image in the past. So once I'm done, I get it to where I want it. Let me just see what it looks like if I bump the tint up even more. I like that even better. So I'm plus 13 and 8.5. If you make that much of adjustment in Lightroom, this, like I said, it's blown out purple. So I'll hit save. So here's it saves it right back into Lightroom. I mean, and you can tell just by looking at the image right now how much of a change it made. This one, here's the Lightroom alone. And honestly, once you compare the two and you get used to comparing the two side by side, Alien Skin gives the image so much more depth and more of a 3D look, more texture. Even when I think it looks really good in Lightroom, like with this image, when I edited it in Lightroom, I thought it looked really good. I liked everything about it. I liked the colors. And then once I get it done and make my final touches in exposure, it's like always, all right, wow, this is what I was looking for. So I marked it red this way, in the same way. Like I said, if there is anything, if I wanted to darken, if I do look at this and say, you know what, let me darken the bricks a little bit. I mean, just super fast. I mean, this is the auto mask. Super fast job, real quick. No. Give everything else around her. That's where I would leave it right there. All right, so that's it. What I'll do is then I explained it a little bit. I'll pick a couple images. I'll show you how quick I can get it done with the presets. Not making too many more adjustments than what I have made available to you guys, and I'll grab a different preset than the one I just used. But real quick, I didn't want this to drag out this long for everybody. I mainly just wanted to show that how different these are than regular presets. And like I said, most of them are just one click, and then you got to figure out how to adjust them to make them look like everybody else uses them, which is a pain in the ass. So yeah, let me answer any questions, and then I'll do just like 5 images real quick. And then if anybody wants to stay on, and ask a little bit, ask a few more, I'm cool with that too. So let me just answer some of you guys' questions. Yeah, side by side of the raw versus the exposure. Yeah, you can definitely do that. So let's do this. You click on the RA for this one. Wait, I don't know why that did that. That looks horrible. There it goes. That looks better. Let me do this one first. All right, so there's side by side. Zoom in. Like I said, I feel bad. I grabbed it out of focus image of Eric's. But to me, for my editing style, this is where I like my greens. It's, if you look at the sharpening, I mean, that's a huge difference in sharpening. I think you'll probably see more of a difference with the next one. But let's do that. Let's throw this one up here, and this one up here. Let's look at skin tones and depth. I mean, the sharpening alone, I mean, she doesn't even look like she's in focus in the Lightroom edit. And like I said, I didn't add any sharpening, but even if I did, it wouldn't look anything like this. I can promise you that. I mean, this looks completely different. So it's night and day. And the cool thing is, if this is too much, if some of you are looking at this and saying, you know what, this looks over edited, which is, I caught a lot of shit from my Leica Q2 review, from internet trolls saying that my editing looks like shit and I have no soul. My images have no soul, and all my images are over edited, and that whole nine. But if you do think this isn't your style, it's over edited. I get it completely. My editing style isn't for everybody, and yours shouldn't be either. That's what's kind of cool about that overall saturation bar or intensity bar inside of Alien Skin Exposure. You would get this look. You could compare it to this and be like, all right, it's a little bit too much. Let me just drop it down a little bit, somewhere in between, and then I'd be happy. Save it, and you're good to go. The grain that's added to this is probably part of why it looks a little bit sharper. Let's go up to him. I mean, I use the dehaze brush, but I mean, that's not the entire reason why it looks completely different. Come on, fire away. Let me hear it. I know you guys have to have some. I mean, if you don't have any questions, if you guys see an image on the bottom that jumps out at you, if you like a reception image or a close-up image, or if you want to see a side-by-side comparison of something, the whole idea of this is to show you guys what these presets can do, and how powerful they are, and customizable they are. So I definitely want to have you guys pick my brain a little bit about the best way to use them. And with the discount that I can offer for 24 hours, you get the discount for Alien Skin, which drops it from $130 down to $99, and then I believe the bundle for both Lightroom presets, which comes with 2 black and white presets too. I think the bundle for both is $120, which is basically the going price for presets that are one-click presets and have nothing to do with any other software but Lightroom. So it's a pretty good deal. Just hoping you guys can get a good gist of how these work. If you already have Alien Skin, then you're good to go. I mean, the cool thing about the presets is to install them. You just double click on the preset and it adds it in automatically. The discount from $130 down to $99 is just something that they offered me to give out to anybody who doesn't have Alien Skin. So, that's not anything I'm offering. That's their being, partners with me on this. The engineers worked with me on designing this in a way that made it easier. They basically want to see this take over for Lightroom. They make changes and release, new versions of it every few months, and it's getting better and better. I can see myself one day converting over. It's just, right now it's not there yet. But yeah, if you have it, it's awesome. I'm hoping a lot of people do have Alien Skin, and that way, you can pick up the Lightroom presets and the Alien Skin preset in the bundle, and you get the discount for that, which it would normally be $150 or $180, but for both it'll be $120 till tomorrow. I'm always up for coffee. I probably won't drink it, but I'll add a lot of sugar and get some kind of girly iced coffee instead. So the presets, I'm going to do another webinar tomorrow morning for a lot of people overseas that wanted to see this. So the next webinar I'm going to hold tomorrow at 9 a.m. As soon as that's done, I'll I'll put them up. So yeah, so the 24-hour clock will actually start once they go live. Basically, you'll have all day tomorrow to catch the discount, and probably, you know, I'll probably end up extending it a little bit. I don't want to, 24 hours is pretty, short period of time. I'll end up probably dragging it out till Saturday for everybody, especially since everybody had to put up with me trying to figure out this webinar crap. So yeah, they'll go live tomorrow. The other thing is, anybody who jumps in on the presets early with the discount and who joined the webinar, I'm going to set it up to where you're an early adopter, which I kind of stole the name off of something else, but any new updates I make to these presets or any new ones that I add, you'll get for free. And that way I can, just ask that you guys help me. You tag the presets, and any photos you post on Instagram, I'll add them to the Twisted Presets, feature them on the Twisted Presets Instagram account that I just started a few days ago. But yeah, I'm going to try to get everything rolling. It's tough, when running the studio at the same time, but editing has always been something I've been passionate about. So I felt off long enough with, showing these off. And now that I'm actually doing it, I'm going to try my best to, keep rolling with it and, make them as big as, they want to go. So Ryan, just seeing your question about what's missing from exposure. It's honestly, I cannot do. So if you think about it as a two-part process, right? In order to get this final look on the right-hand side, I need this look on the left-hand side. I spent months trying to get the final look in just Lightroom. Basically, I tried to cut out one or the other. I honestly thought, hey, there has to be a way that I can get the same look in just Lightroom, or I can get the same look in just Exposure. It's a little bit easier for me because Exposure is a smaller company than obviously Adobe, and I have a good relationship with the owner of Alien Skin and a few of their marketing guys, so I can get in touch with their engineers and they can, work with me. I basically said, hey, here's the final look. This is what I want. I can't duplicate this in just Exposure. I want you guys to try to do it yourself and see if you can do it. And basically, it's the way that they do their algorithms for their HSL panel, for, different things. They weren't able to do it. So, I can use Exposure, but, my studio and my own personal work, it has a look to it that, I spent years developing. I don't want to stray too far from that. So as much as I would love to just use one software, not the other, it's impossible. I haven't been able to work with an Adobe engineer to see if they can do it, but, I know enough people that are experts with Lightroom. I consider myself a pretty, I wouldn't say expert, but I'm pretty damn knowledgeable with it. So I can't do it. You can see the difference, and it's just because there's more. It's a completely different software, and it has more, more that you can do in it, especially with layers. But yeah, I can't get the same look, which sucks. Trust me, I wish I could. I wish I could cut one of these out. All right, Jeff, so the last image. Real quick, is everybody still on it? I mean, I know everybody's not asking questions, but I don't want to waste anybody's time if everybody's kind of already lost the interest or ready to jump off. Just everybody just give me a quick I'm still here type of deal. All right, sweet. All right, so let's do this. I will edit. I'll edit a few. I'll edit 3 different pictures real quick. I'll go through them exactly how I would edit them. And these are all images that I've edited already. But I can't. I don't have anything to compare them to. They might look a little bit different, but for the most part, I know that they'll look pretty similar. So I'll grab the last image. I'll grab, I think a good one to grab would be, this one here. Because there's one other thing that exposure does that I'll show you that I don't tell many people that I use, but I only use it to enhance something that's already there, but it makes it an image just that a little tiny bit more. It just pops a little bit more. So I'll start with this one, then I'll hop to the one at the end here. If this is the one you were talking about, Jess. I hate crooked images. So the plugin, Nelly, to set it up, it does it on its own. You don't have to set it up. As soon as you install as soon as you install Exposure, it the same as Photoshop, it automatically becomes available. Lightroom recognizes it as another software on your system that can be used as a plugin. You don't have to do any type of setup whatsoever. So no, not a stupid question at all. It's amazing how easy that is. All right, so let me start with this because I'll show you another trick with exposure that's pretty neat. 16 by 10. Let me see. So here's the natural looking one. Let me see. You know what? I use this one only because I know that's what I used when I edited this originally. So right off the bat, it's a little bit too warm. I'm going to make white balance, just a little adjustment with the white balance. All right, let's do this. Darker shadows, add a little bit of vignette. So for anybody that didn't see a blog post on this, this was a very cloudy day and it was raining out almost. It was drizzling. There's I have a Godox light on a 12-foot stand outside of the window. This couple rented an Airbnb in New Hope, Pennsylvania, which is a gorgeous town in the mountains. This was on a farm. Really cool spot, but you know, a lot of people that hire me and my wife for our work, they love the look of this, you know, sunlight and how we use sunlight, natural light, but you know, also when there isn't any light, artificial light. So all the light you see coming in the window here is 100% from a flash. So it's got an 8200 and a grid with a warming gel. So here's the red tone adjustment. And then you know what, I kind of like it without it. So I'll leave it off. Split toning. That's the reset. I got to find the regular one. So what I'll do is anytime that you have like haze over top of it, you bump it up to clarity. Does work a little bit. And that's it. That's all the changes I'm going to make. I'm going to leave it just at that. So all I did was white balance. I added the vignette back in. I did the darker shadows. And that's it. No other adjustments. Just to double check. Yeah, no sharpening. No grain. Shut that off. I shut the calibration off. All right, so that was 3 clicks to get here. Go into exposure, edit a copy. The other thing it does is it also keeps it with the same color space, which is sRGB. So when it duplicates your, when it creates a virtual copy, it doesn't change the color space. A few people for some reason had it change it, and it couldn't figure out why the colors would change. So that's not it. This is the one that I'm going to be putting up for sale. So real quick, I'll just look at the before. It's amazing how flat it looks now, but compared to, I'll boost exposure up a little bit. And now, like I said, this is where I'll get my white balance exactly where I want it. So it's a little warm. And basically, I'm just going to mess it until it gets to where I want it. All right, that looks good. Saturation is a little much. All right, and what I'm going to do is, cool color's already on. I'll see what it looks like with it off. Nah, I like it on. So by default, it is this color slider is at -20 by default with this on, and then you can turn it off and it'll drop it to 0. So I'll add grain. So now here's the next step. You know what? Their skin tones are still a little too orange. So let me just saturation, just a basic, drop it down like that. All right, so here's the one thing you can do. There is a panel in Alien Skin that I despised at first because I was a huge fan of, and I became known for this early on in my career, of lens flare. And I was, creating real lens flare, and I still do the same. I love lens flare, but here's the thing: I would never use Photoshop or any other software to create a lens flare that wasn't there already. I love the way that the light's coming in, and it's washing them out. It's a little bit, not much. If I zoom in, the detail. It looks like the focus I got on the watch, or with a romantic shot like this or an intimate shot like this, I'm not too concerned with where the focus is, as long as the image is portraying exactly what I wanted to capture. So here's the overlays. You can use these for headshots. You can use them to create like backgrounds. It's another layer of adjustments you can make. So if you go to this light effect, right, click on this. It has like these tons of goofy, different looking, crazy effects. Most of them, 90% of them, are garbage, but they've been making them better with each new version. So you go to lens flare. Maybe it's not lens. No, it's not lens flare. Look, this right here is identical to the Leica lens that I use. I mean, pretty damn close. So I know they ripped it off of that, but that's not what I want. So you go to sun flare. You go to, I use this reflections too. So basically, you can move this around wherever you want. If you look, this is the look it has. I'm going to move it up here where I know the light's coming from. Control the opacity. And what happens is if you go down here and you hit protect, you can protect an area that you don't want it to hit. So let's just say I don't want it on their face, right? If I move the protect slider up, it takes that effect completely off of that area. So, these little tiny things, you'll have to, it'll take a little bit of time to learn, but anybody, I'll make sure I'm available to answer these questions. I don't use this all that much, but if you unclick it, you can do the before, show what it looks like after, bring the opacity down and down. So basically all I wanted to do was, I'm already creating a fake sun, right? I'm already creating fake sunlight coming through the window. I'm using a flash. It's not real sun. I'm going for a certain look, a certain effect. Can't do anything like this in Lightroom. So I just want to enhance that a little bit. You can mess around with the zoom, opacity. So it's a slight adjustment. So anybody who's seen me post this image on Instagram or Facebook or in the blog post, I added this extra light effect. And if you look now at the before, I mean, that's the before that I edited in Lightroom. This is the after. It's a little bit too washed out still, so rather than dropping the opacity down, I'll go up here to the tone curve. You know what? Let me go back to the base. Add some clarity just to bring in his eyelashes. Bring in more detail here. All right, so right there, before, after. So with this one, yeah, this one took a little bit longer because I wanted to show you guys that effect, the overlays effect. Close out of it. I got bump the focus up a little bit. Now you can see more detail on his eyelashes. Let it render real quick. That's where I'll keep it right there. So I'm curious how it looks compared to the one that I already edited, but this is where I would keep it. All right, so save that. I'll do a side-by-side with the raw file too, but that's it. So, I mean, it's a cool effect. I definitely don't recommend using fake sun flare when there really is none. But if you're just using it to enhance an effect that, is already there, I don't see any problem with it whatsoever. I think, it added to the image, made it a little bit more, like I said, I'm already creating fake sun, so what's the difference? It might be a little bit too washed out, a little bit, to some, but to me, I think a little bit washed out gives it more of a romantic look or feel to it. So yeah, this is where, and if you wanted to change the orange hue a little bit, you would just grab the orange hue and go a little bit more red with it. There you go. So that's it. That's where I would leave it. So flag that baby red. We're good to go. So talking about going back and re-editing, yeah, it's crazy because, I look at old stuff that I even, just did 2-3 years ago, and just from the enhancements and upgrades that Alien Skin has made to the exposure software over the past 2 years, I mean, has given photographers like myself more tools and, more control over the editing. So now, not only is it has to do with my editing style changing, which it really hasn't changed all that much. The look that I've been going for it's still the same, but it's what I can do now compared to what I could do 2-3 years ago. I'm constantly going back and editing, because if I add, what happened was I added this image to my portfolio on the Twisted Oaks website. If you go to engagements, I think it's like one of the top 5 images in the gallery. But it stood out from the others. So there were a few that I was like, what, let me just go back, grab the raw files, re-edit them, get them to match, because I don't want clients to think it's like a guessing game of what kind of editing they're going to get. I want them to know that there's going to be consistency in it. So, from image to image, from shoot to shoot, not image to image, but different shoots can have different feels. I might feel like a cooler look might, is what I felt that day or how I seen things. This, I really wanted a warmer look and a warmer feel because it's more intimate. As we went outside, and I'll edit this last picture, from outside to inside, you can differ from, warm to cool. Obviously the sun I'm making it look like the sun's out here. It's not, but once we get outside and you go to this guy, it's I can make it a little bit more cooler, on the cooler side if I want to. So I'll edit this one. It's getting late. I don't want to hold anybody else up, but I'll go through this one real quick. There's no sun flare with this. There's nothing I'm going to add, like anything fancy. But for the most part, I don't want anybody to think that the alien skin exposure side is complicated. It's really not. Don't let it intimidate you whatsoever. Sometimes I show people that overlay thing, and it's like, oh, and now it's complicated. It's that, you'll get used to that. You can mess around with it, and it's just like anything else. But for the most part, exposure is set up identically to Lightroom. You'll figure it out quick. So for $99, and you get all the upgrades for free with them, it's so worth it with just the amount that you can do. And with exposure, it's crazy. It took my editing to a whole new level, and it was a year after I had been using that everybody wanted to know what I was doing, or how I was editing my images, because they looked nothing like anybody else's. And it was like, wow, finally, I've got a unique look to myself. And it took an extra software to do it, but hey, if that's what it takes to get my work to look unique, that's what it takes, and I'm definitely willing to do it. So don't be scared about putting a little bit more work in. Yeah, the sharpening effect alone sharpening effect was what turned me onto this in the first place. And then I started messing with the other stuff, and I was like, holy shit, like this is crazy how good some of these sliders work, and how much different and better they work than Lightroom. The problem is Lightroom still has certain things about it that are better, organization wise, but there's a lot of good things about this exposure that I can see taking over Lightroom in the next couple of years or year. So I'll blow through this last edit real quick, and then see if there's any questions I missed. Yeah, so all right, so syncing it, yeah, you can sync the adjustments and exposure. It's actually not called syncing, it's you copy and paste. I'll put that in the notes, that when the presets get purchased, I'll put shortcuts, because it is a little bit different. When it would drove me crazy early on, like how do I sync everything, all the edits together? And actually, if I was to highlight all of these, if this was the same shoot, if I was to highlight all of them and hit the preset, it would add the preset to all of them at the same time. You wouldn't even have to sync them. Sometimes I do it by accident, and I don't want to do it that way, but it's pretty easy to just hit, go to edit and then hit, go back a step. But here's what I'll do. I'll edit this one, and let's get rolling. So let me just grab a different one. have to resend these from my laptop. They definitely did not come over right. But let's go with this one. So this is the neutral color one. Compared to this, it's, like I said, they're very slight differences. But enough to where they're the same differences that you would get from buying the dirty boots and messy hair presets. I promise you that. I mean, some of them they throw in there that are just drastically different, and I don't ever see them use them in their, when they're marketing or social media. So any presets I'm going to sell, they're the ones I'm using. So here we go. Profile adjustment. This one is less contrast. You go up here. I can add more contrast. Let's go to there. Red orange adjustment. Actually, I didn't even notice too much of a change there. I'll change my white balance since it was pretty dark out when I took this. ISO 1600. She really liked the look of the birch tree, so I wanted to get them in a shot. Let's see, where am I at? Split toning. Go a little bit warmer with it, so that if I hit reset, it gets cooler. And it only resets that one change, nothing else. It didn't reset any other changes I made. All right, so that's it. Warmer tones. I'll use a graduated filter real quick just to draw some attention. That's it. Done. Another thing to keep in mind is a lot of people who are used to dropping the highlights down all the way to save, the sky or highlights. They want to see all the highlights. Watch their skin tones. If I bump the highlights up, I'm not, there's nothing in the sky I'm trying to save. I don't care about the sky. There's barely any of it up there. If I up the exposure, everything gets super bright. If I bump the highlights up like they are, their skin tones will get brighter. So this right here is where I would leave it. If you were to look at this, you wouldn't notice or think that there's any vignette. There isn't. I didn't, the vignette is still gone down here. Just the graduated filters that I added, and there was only 2 of them. So, I mean, that right there, like I said, if you were to look at this and say, all right, this looks good, I can send this to the client, I like this edit, I would say it. Let's bring it into exposure. Edit in exposure. The white background is a change you'll have to make. I'm going to definitely make myself available to everybody who purchases these, just to make sure that, in the beginning, I know what everybody might get caught up on. You have to make a change to this to change the background. I believe it's, I forget, it's been a while, but if you purchase the presets and you get the 1 month, for free trial for exposure, or you already have it, let me know. I definitely recommend making the background white once you get here. And zooming in and zooming out is just a scroll on the mouse. I mean, that's it. You don't have to hold down Command and plus or any of that jazz. All right, so if you look, the sky's got a little bit of a blue tint just right out of Lightroom. You'll notice as soon as I hit this, the preset, that'll change. So it's too much. This, right off the bat, to me, it looks like it changed too much. It became too, over edited or over processed, whatever. So what I'll do is, I know that it could just be too drastic of a change in saturation or the blacks. I'm telling you, one of the biggest things for me is the white balance. And once I get it on one image, you copy it to the rest and they're good to go. But show before. So let's look at their skin tones, right? Yeah, they're not that sharp either. Yeah, I can't tell if I missed the focus or... Anyway. I'm a shitty photographer. What can I say? Before, after. I mean, if you can see the shadows in their faces, it definitely adds contrast. And I'm not adding any contrast. I mean, the contrast slider's at 0. I'm making changes to the tone curve, which, it does change contrast effect, but exposure gives it such a more 3D look. And the skin tones look really, to me, I mean, this is what I felt that their skin tones looked like. Maybe a little less orange, but they were both pretty tan. This was definitely the color of her dress. And like I said, you could do it before and after. It looks like, it was a little bit more purple, but I'm also making it warmer. So it's not a drastic change. That's just basically from the white balance. So you just see what happens if I go here, turn that on, get that blue look. Yeah, you know what? I like it off for this, so I'm not going to touch this. This is going to stay at 0, which is here, but it's turned off on that layer. I'll add grain, go back to the base preset. Let's see, anything else? Maybe bump the midtones up. Focus is already set. Grain, you're not seeing the grain. This is going to be confusing at first for you guys because you're going to be like, oh, there's no grain at it. But the grain layer is on. So if you click on the grain layer, it's adding grain. And the opacity is at 100%. It's not making any other changes but the grain. So it's, rather than trying to fool around with it or mess with it, you can just turn it on and it'll look good right off the bat. And then you can adjust it from there. So yeah, go back to the base. And that's it. Check the before again. Maybe I'll go a little bit cooler. All right, that's it. Save. Done. All right, so real quick, let's do a side-by-side. No, not that side-by-side. No. Stop that. Full image. Where is the original? All right, there you go. I guess it's kind of tough to see. Let's see, do it differently. That's it. You get 2 options with this one. That's shitty. I know that. All right, but look, you can see. Let's just zoom in real quick, right? You got, yeah. I mean, this just the Lightroom edit. Even though it looks, to me, it looked good right out the bat. And it was perfect. I would have, normally just throwing it up on Facebook, Instagram, send it to the client, compare it over to here, and look at the extra depth that it has, the detail. And I'm telling you, if you're thinking to yourself, well, you didn't add any sharpness to this, it doesn't matter. I promise you that once you start playing with it. So Alien Skin also has a better algorithm for noise. If you have a high ISO shot and you want to get the noise down, it does a better job with noise and smoothing it out where Lightroom just looks soft. But yeah, this is it. I'm going to fine tune these, make sure that these presets aren't missing anything before they go up for sale tomorrow. And everything's on my laptop. That's the problem. So I'll be packaging everything up nice and neat tomorrow. I'll do the other webinar tomorrow. I mean, if you guys, forget anything and just want to hop back on tomorrow, feel free. But yeah, that's it. I mean, I really feel like these are unique presets. There's nothing out there right now. There's no exposure presets out there right now. I can promise you that. So it's completely different. I really think whether you use the presets as I make them or if you use them as learning tools to kind of do things your own way, it's a game changer. There's no doubt in my mind it's a game changer. So to see presets, one-click presets that are so popular by photographers and using them, everybody's work looks the same, and that drives me crazy. There's no better time than now to find a look that's all your own, and this is the way to do it, because you're going to be the one putting in the extra step using Alien Skin, and nobody else is going to be doing it. That's what I did. Nobody else did it. And people that did do it, they barely used it for anything. They used 10% of it. So, yeah. Any questions? Scott, I'm doing the other webinar tomorrow morning, man, if you want to hop on that. Sorry about that. Yeah, and JP, the Lightroom edit looks flat. It's crazy because it doesn't look flat when you first look at it. Anytime I edit in just Lightroom, I always think to myself, all right, that looks good. I'm not going to bring it into exposure. It's fine. I really edited this really good. And I remind myself, no, I have to bring this into exposure, because once I edit it, it's, I'll see how flat it looks. It's crazy how flat it looks. And, you don't see it until you compare them. But that's what I wanted to show you guys, because if I was just to put these presets up for sale and say, hey, this is what exposure does and this is what it can do for your work, you have to see it to believe it. For me to say yeah, Lightroom edits look flat, this is going to be a game changer. Nobody's going to buy these presets. And I don't expect these presets to become popular. I didn't do this to make a killing, and pay my house off with them. I honestly did this because I know there's going to be a handful of photographers who really appreciate it, who are going to, change their game when it comes to editing. And I honestly I'm excited to see people use them. This, I know, Cecilia, you tell me all the time. All the time. All right, let me get out of this. All right, so yeah, I appreciate you guys hopping on. It was cool to see so many people. There was a lot more that signed up that didn't make it on, and you know what? I didn't know what to expect. Every time I've been asked to sell the presets in the past, I've kind of just, blown it off and really had no interest in it. I've done a few webinars that just kind of showed how I edited it, my photos, and went through it really quick. But, nobody could really just try to do it on their own and run with it. I needed to create these presets in order to, to make it a process that you guys can adopt and, on your own and run with it. So yeah, I'm hoping you guys are interested in purchasing them, giving them a shot. Like I said, I don't expect too many of these to sell right off the bat. There's too many people that don't understand the difference or what exposure does, and a lot of people look at it like, I don't want to add an extra software to my editing process, so that's ridiculous. I'm not interested. So it's going to be I'm going to do my best to keep up with everybody. Everybody that purchases the presets, check in on everybody, see how they're doing. Don't hesitate to reach out to me, ask me any questions, about anything. Nothing's a stupid question with software. There's still things that people show me in Lightroom that I'm just like, wow, I had no idea. So nothing's a stupid question. I want to make sure I take care of everybody the best I can. And then, yeah, I'm just excited to see what everybody does with it. Yeah, I thought about the Facebook group. I could definitely do that. I'll probably ask a couple people to maybe help me run it. It'll probably be small, a little bit, and intimate, but it'll be good for those using this preset system. It's not, I'm not going to do it with the hopes that it'll blow up like looks like film or anything like that. But, it would be cool just to get a group of everybody using these. That way we can kind of bounce different things off of each other. And, you guys give me ideas for what any changes you might want to, see down the road for either the Lightroom side of it or the exposure side of it. Having access to the exposure engineers, it's pretty cool that I can ask them for different things and, they can push it through. There's been a few things that I've asked, and they've made it happen. So yeah, get a Facebook group started. I'll do that. I'll get a few people to help me run it. And, the Instagram, I'm going to try to get you guys start tagging, the Twisted presets, and I'll try to start sharing you guys' work. But I'll get everything up and available tomorrow. Yeah, there's going to be tons of tech questions. I expect it. The good thing is, honestly, I've been using Lightroom way before I ever got into photography. I've been using exposure for the past 5 years before it was anything close to what it is today. So I'm pretty knowledgeable with it, but like I said, there's always somebody out there that knows more about it. And, it'll be cool because I'll invite one of the engineer buddies of mine from Alien Skin into the Facebook group. That way he can, anybody who really wants to get technical and ask, what's the difference between this, how this works in exposure and Lightroom. It'll be cool to have, somebody who really knows their stuff give an answer.